The Old Christians Club rugby team plays a match in Montevideo, Uruguay. Roberto Canessa gets the ball and his teammates call for the pass, but he ignores them and tries to score alone. He fails and the team loses. They are flying to Chile the next day for another match in Santiago. Numa Turcati is not on the team, but his friends invite him along, and after some hesitation he agrees to go. On October 13, 1972, 45 people board Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. 19 rugby players, their friends, family members, and a crew of 5. Nando Pardu boards with his mother and his younger sister Susana. Team captain Marcelo Perez is there. Roberto is there. Numa sits down next to a man named Ramon Sol Martinez who explains the route. They will cross Planchon Pass through the Andes, fly past Curacao in Chile, and land in Santiago. Over the Andes, the plane hits severe turbulence. The cabin shakes hard, passengers are thrown around, and luggage falls everywhere. Then the tail section rips completely off the back of the plane. Ramon Martinez and everyone sitting in the rear are sucked out and fall into the mountains below. The rest of the fuselage slides across a glacier at full speed and slams to a stop somewhere deep in the Andes. Metal tears apart and seats rip from the floor. 12 people die on impact, including both pilots and Nando's mother. The survivors look outside and see massive white mountains in every direction with no roads, no buildings, and no people anywhere. The altitude is around 3,600 meters, and the air is already thin and cold. Marcelo Perez gets to his feet and takes charge. He tells people to help the injured, block the open back of the plane with luggage and seat cushions, and find anything useful in the wreckage. The first night, the temperature drops far below zero, and everyone packs inside the broken fuselage together. By the next day, 5 more are dead from their injuries, including the co-pilot, bringing the death toll to 17. 28 people are still alive. They search every bag and every corner of the wreckage and put together everything they find. Some chocolate bars, some crackers, candy, and a couple of bottles of wine. That is the entire food supply for 28 people. They start rationing immediately, 1 small square of chocolate per person per day. They take flat pieces of metal from the wreckage and lay them in the sun to melt snow, collecting the water drop by drop into bottles, which takes hours to fill. Nando wakes up from his coma. He has been unconscious since the moment of impact, and his friends had started to assume he might not survive. He opens his eyes and asks where his mother and sister are, and they tell him his mother died in the crash. His sister Susana is still alive and lying nearby, but her injuries are getting worse each day. Nando gets up and moves to her and stays beside her for 3 days until she dies from her injuries. They carry her outside and bury her in the snow beside the plane. Nando has now lost his mother and his sister in under 2 weeks, and something shifts in him after that. He stops fearing the mountain because there is nothing left for it to take from him. On the 4th day, Roberto and some of the stronger survivors climb higher up the slope to see where they are. When they reach the top, they look out and see nothing but mountains in every direction, ridge after ridge of white peaks with no valley, no road, no village, and no sign of anything human. They are deep inside the Andes, nowhere near Chile, and completely cut off from the world. Around day 12, the food is completely gone. The tiny daily rations have run out, and everyone is getting weak. Infections are developing in wounds that nobody has the medicine or equipment to treat properly, and people who seem stable are getting worse. Outside in the snow, perfectly preserved by the freezing temperature, are the bodies of the people who died in the crash. The conversation happens. Someone says what everyone has been thinking, but nobody has said. If they want to survive, they have to eat the dead. It lands hard on the group because these are young Catholic men raised with deep beliefs about the human body and what is sacred. Some turn away when they hear it, and some cannot stay in the conversation at all. But others speak plainly. Those people are gone, and what is in the snow is only what they left behind. Their friends would want them to live. Some of the survivors say it directly to each other that if they die, the others can use their bodies to survive, and they say it as an act of love for the people sitting next to them. After long and painful discussions, some of them agree. They go outside and cut small pieces of flesh from the frozen bodies and bring them inside. Many cry while eating, and some cannot finish. Numa refuses and holds his position for days while growing weaker because he believes it is wrong. Others who also refuse slowly change their minds as starvation closes in, but Numa holds out the longest. They find a small transistor radio buried in the wreckage and manage to get it working. A news reporter announces that the official search for the missing Uruguayan plane has been called off. After 11 days of finding nothing, the Chilean and Uruguayan authorities have concluded that there are no survivors and the families have been notified. Nobody is coming. If they are getting off this mountain, they have to do it themselves. Some of the survivors want to start hiking out immediately, but others say the mountains are too high and they are too weak and it would be suicide. The argument goes back and forth, and for now they stay. 17 days after the crash, an avalanche comes down the mountain and hits the wreckage directly. Thousands of pounds of snow pour into the fuselage in seconds, and people wake up in total darkness buried under packed snow with almost no air. The ones who are not completely buried dig with their bare hands through dense hard snow and pull people out through the night. 8 people die, suffocated in their sleep inside the plane. Among the dead is Marcelo Perez, the team captain who had been leading the group since the first hour after the crash. The survivors dig out the fuselage and keep going. More people die in the weeks that follow from infections and the relentless cold, and the group gets smaller and smaller. Around day 30, Roberto, Nando, Tintin Vizintin, and Numa form a small expedition to go find the tail section of the plane. Numa has an infected wound on his leg that has been getting worse for weeks, but he says nothing about it and keeps walking. They tell him to go back to the fuselage as the infection is spreading, so he walks back to it. They find the tail section after days of searching, and inside they discover some food, insulation material they can use to build better sleeping bags, and electrical components, including batteries. They also find 6 more bodies from the back rows of the plane who were pulled out during impact. They take everything useful they can carry and make the long walk back to the main wreckage. The batteries allow them to improve the radio, and the insulation material becomes sleeping bags that will matter greatly later. Weeks continue to pass on the mountain. They melt snow for water every day, portion out food carefully, keep the fuselage as sealed from the cold as they can, and look after the injured. More people die, and the number of survivors keeps dropping. Numa's leg infection keeps spreading. He never complains about it and eats less than his share so that others have more, and helps wherever he can without drawing attention to any of it. Around day 60, his friends wake up in the morning and find him dead in his sleep. In his hand is a small note that says there is no greater love than to give one's life for one's friends. After Numa dies, the decision is made that they cannot keep waiting because waiting is just dying slowly. Roberto and Nando will attempt to walk out of the mountains. They prepare carefully over several days. They use the insulation material from the tail section to sew together sleeping bags and pack the small amount of food they have left. On December 12th, 71 days after the crash, the 3 of them say goodbye to the others and start walking west. The climb is hard from the very first hour. The air at that altitude is so thin that every step costs real effort, and their lungs burn constantly. The snow is deep and they sink into it with each step, and the slope does not flatten. They climb all day, and when the light goes, they crawl into their sleeping bags and survive the night in temperatures that nearly kill them. In the morning, they get up and climb again. After several days, they reach a high ridge and look west, expecting to see Chile on the other side with green valleys and lower ground. Instead, they see more mountains, range after range of white peaks stretching west with no end. Chile is far, much further than any of them had estimated. They look at the food they are carrying, and there is not enough for 3 people to cover what remains. Tintin works this out before anyone says it, and tells Roberto and Nando he is going back. He hands over his share of the food, turns around, and walks east back toward the wreckage while Roberto and Nando face west and keep moving. They keep walking day after day as the terrain slowly changes. Snow becomes patchy and rock appears beneath their feet. The air gets easier to breathe with each hour they lose altitude. They reach a valley with a river running through it, and trees along the bank. A lizard crosses a rock in front of them, the first living creature they have seen since the crash. Then across the river, standing on a horse and staring at them, is a man. They wave and shout, but the river is loud and the man cannot hear them. He watches for a moment and then reaches into his bag, ties a pen and a piece of paper around a rock, and throws it across the water. Nando picks it up and writes quickly. He explains they are survivors of the Uruguayan plane that crashed in the Andes, and that there are 14 more people still alive at the crash site in the mountains. He begs for help. wraps the note around the rock, and throws it back across the river. The man reads it and brings them back to his home and gives them food. Rescue team arrives, and within hours helicopters are being fueled and prepared. The news reaches the world that survivors from a plane crash everyone believed was fatal over 2 months ago are still alive somewhere in the Andes. On December 22, 1972, helicopters appear over the crash site. The survivors hear the rotors and come outside, and some of them can barely walk, and some hold each other up as the helicopters come down and land on the snow. 72 days after Flight 571 went down, help has arrived. Roberto and Nando are picked up from the valley where they waited, and one by one all 16 remaining survivors are lifted off the glacier and flown to hospitals in Chile. At the hospital they are treated for severe malnutrition, frostbite, infections, and injuries. They have lost enormous amounts of weight, and their bodies have been through damage that takes a long time to recover from. Journalists fill the hallways outside their rooms, and the story becomes international news within hours. People call them the miracle of the Andes. Families arrive at the hospital and parents see their sons for the first time in over 2 months, while some families learn their person is not coming back. The survivors are asked about what happened on the mountain, and the truth comes out slowly. It was eat or die, and they chose to live. Numa's voice is heard one last time. He says that when the survivors came back, the newspapers called them men who returned from death, but the survivors were dead on that mountain too, the same as the ones who never came home. The only difference was they got to return. He says the answer to why they lived when the others did not lives inside each of them. Let the people who did not come back be remembered for who they were, not just for how they died. The last image is all 16 survivors together in the hospital, thin and exhausted, but alive and together.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like and subscribe for more movie explanations. Comment below your favorite moment. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.